We are going to start with vital and urgent issues, something very much that comes up in this area, climate and the environment, from reducing carbon emissions to protecting our green spaces, building resilience against flooding as well, challenges affecting every part of West Yorkshire, but particularly around here. And just a reminder of what Jane said, that some of these issues are a council issue. The Mayor has different powers and different remit, but will help to answer these issues and burning questions as quickly as possible. Stop talking, let's get started. So the first one is from Sarah Jane. She's not here, but it was a subject that came up very much, the climate, the environment. And the first one, Mayor, was how are you planning for future flood events in West Yorkshire, specifically where we are here tonight in West Yorkshire?
Oh, thank you so much, Lottie. And evening, folks. Thank you all so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be able to do Mayor's Question Time across West Yorkshire. We're moving across local authority regions. I do message the Mayor on BBC Radio Leeds with Alison, and we get some amazing questions because you can't prep for nights like this or sessions on the radio. So please do feel free to ask anything that's concerning you. I am your Mayor, and I am here to listen to what you have to say. Now, if it's quite technical or particularly local, I will refer to colleagues in the room and councillors, because I want to give you the best answers you deserve, because you've come here tonight and you deserve a clear answer. If it's something that we are thinking about, I can take away and we'll take your details and get back to you on that. But I'm so glad you've started with the climate emergency, because it takes me back to when I was last here at this in this community centre, and we were launching the flood defence works in Mytholmroyd, and it was with the Environment Agency, the council, and so many others who had all worked together to try and make sure that living in Mytholmroyd wasn't a stressful existence where you're always looking at the weather and waiting for the siren. And we know that in Hebden, some amazing shops and businesses washed away in the floods, and Jane, the leader, who, as she said, Calderdale might be small, but it's ever so mighty, just like Jane. But she reminded me that it's almost 10 years, is that right, Jane? Since the Boxing Day floods. We know that what used to be a once-in-a-generation catastrophe is now almost every 2 years. We have to act, and when the temperature of the planet is rising exponentially, we have to accept that it's our responsibility to do what we can, and we can't do everything, do what we can for the future and for our kids and grandchildren. So that's why my climate environment plan is so important. We've got many tens of millions of pounds attached to that plan, and it's in a number of opportunities. Transport is obviously one of the biggest ones. 80% of the emissions are transport. I've committed to zero carbon emissions by 2038, so we've got to get a move on. That's why the tram was so important, to have that money, that £2.1 billion announced for tram, because if you want people out of their car, they have to have an alternative option. That's why we're bringing buses back into public control. That's why we've got our integrated transport plan, where it's going to be easy to get around West Yorkshire with bus, tram, train, bike, walking, active travel. So transport's really, really important, but also housing. We know we've got, and you'll know, you know, living here, you know better than most people, drafty homes, older homes that need retrofitting, so you can lower your energy bills and raise your family in a warm and comfortable home. It's also about the environment. And also we're working on our environment plan that we're being developed as we go forward over the next few years. That's right, isn't it, Liz? So we can see about water that flows down the valleys. So working with Slow the Flow, some of you will know those organisations, tree planting and so on. What are we doing for the environment to make sure that we can keep our valleys dry and safe? But it's also about skills. And I pledged when I became the Mayor in 2021, 1,000 green jobs, skilled green jobs for young people. We're way over that target now. But what was an amazing outcome for that manifesto commitment was a Green Jobs Task Force that came together to help me with that plan. And one of the recommendations was, it's too late in secondary schools. Young people don't know what these jobs are, they don't know the opportunity. So we've taken that recommendation, we've implemented it, and we're now going into primary schools, talking about green jobs, talking about the climate emergency, talking about those skilled jobs. And I was at an event in London this morning speaking on this very subject to hundreds of delegates, talking about what we're doing in West Yorkshire. And it's such an extraordinary figure, but the green technologies and tech sector here in West Yorkshire is worth £8 billion a year with 3,000 companies. This is about jobs, regeneration, investment and skills. So it's our responsibility to tackle what we can in the climate emergency, but also it's about laying the groundwork for the future in skills and investment, in our young people knowing they've got a future in the green sector. So I'm really pleased that we're here in Mytholmroyd. And when we were here talking about the flood defences, people were quite emotional and saying, I've lived a very stressful life living here and now I can relax. And the same is true of Hebden, where you've just got to stop this water coming into people's businesses and washing them away, because we can't keep rebuilding. We just have to stop the water as much as we can. And I know probably lots of you in this room are doing lots in your community to help us on that task.
Thank you, Mel. Let's stay with climate and the environment. Quite a few questions on this subject, and this is from Gwen. Is Gwen with us? And if so, just make yourself known to us, Gwen. If not, I will read this one. So, why has the BESS planning application, BESS, I'm sure you know, Typical Battery Energy Storage System, why has the BESS planning application been approved when it doesn't have one positive for the area and so many negatives, including massive health and safety issues?
Is there anybody else also interested in this topic? Give us a wave if you are.
Yes,
oh, that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. My understanding is that planning has gone through with particular mitigations and expectations. It's not underway as yet, but this is very much a council decision. However, if I could also say that energy is really important for us, as not just as a nation but as a region, and that's why when Calderdale are developing their local area energy plan, one of the first local authorities to do that, we have to find a way to be sustainable. We have to find a way to have that onshore, offshore wind and opportunities to be innovative about how we manage our energy, because we just cannot be at the beck and call of oligarchs and dictators halfway around the world. We have to ensure that we are resilient here in this country. But I wonder if I could come to you, Jim, if there's a couple of things you'd like to share with, obviously there's a number of residents who are concerned about that.
I absolutely get that, and it has been extremely controversial, and I would say distressing in some ways, in terms of people feel very passionately about it. I just want to say 2 or 3 things, and clearly you as Mayor have no remit over these planning decisions. Who knows what the future might be, but decision was taken by the Planning Committee on this application on the 27th of May, so it's very recent. And it was taken in line with national and local planning policy. And I just wanted to say, because people have said, well, it's all political, the Planning Committee is not political, it's cross-party, it's not equipped, as they say, that's nothing to do with sadomasochism, can I point out? It's everything to do with directing people to vote in a different way, in a particular way, and it is not whipped, it cannot be whipped legally. There was a very detailed report, as people will have seen, and independent advice was taken by officers from expert planning barrister, and they finalised the report with a recommendation to accept. I know there was a long discussion, there were about 100 people in the town hall, feelings ran very, very high, and that was the decision. And as you say there were planning conditions put against that. And I absolutely understand why people continue to have worries, and I'm sure it's something that we'll come back to as local council again and again in the next few weeks and months.
I think certainly in the questions, Jane and Met, there was certainly a feeling of why so close to people, to houses, to amenities. That seemed to be a big issue that came up, you know, why so close to communities.
Thank you. There are planning regulations, as I understand it. They looked at the application against those national and local planning regulations and met that specification, and that's where we've got to for this process.
Thank you. Yeah. So I know a lot of people wanted to talk about that, and Jane and other councillors are around later on if you wanted to discuss it any further. So we're going to stay with the environment. It's Richard here. Richard, please wait for the microphone. We're heading your way. Thank you so much. If you just stand up and thank you so much.
Hello, Richard.
Well, good evening. First of all, I don't really know what you do as mayor.
Oh, well.
Okay. So hang on to that. Hang on to that as I ask my question. I don't really know what you do. You talk quite generally about your environmental strategies and the sorts of things that you're thinking of. But my question is this: so, in this era of austerity, what are you specifically intending to do to ensure that climate change and its detrimental impacts on the environment are still prioritised?
Thank you so much. And Richard, I'm so glad you asked that question, because the way that politics has been going, you could be in a position where you think, because of austerity and because the funding is tight, we have to make difficult decisions, and actually we can park the climate emergency for now. We don't have to tackle that because it's going to cost us too much. I would suggest that actually it's going to cost us not to do it. So as mayor, specifically my responsibilities are transport, skills, business support, the climate and environment, culture, and also adult education, and I'm also the Police and Crime Commissioner. The role has brought into our region £3 billion. I set the direction of travel, the political direction of travel for all of our local authorities and myself. We are a combined authority, cross-party, so 5 local authorities, myself and other co-optees from different parties, and we make decisions on infrastructure, on skills funding, on transport planning, transport interventions like tram, like bringing buses back under public control. There's a whole raft of things. But alongside that, as well as representing West Yorkshire to government in the Mayor's Council of Mayors and the Council of Regions and Nations, I also chair the UK mayors, there's 14 mayors, and together we talk about how we can work together as well to get greater bang for our buck. So, for example, with the mayors of Yorkshire coming together in the White Rose Agreement, with our transport plan that we went to government to say this is what we need to grow our economy, to make sure there is more money in people's pockets and our businesses thrive. So whilst it sounds esoteric and a little bit high level, underneath that are absolutely clear incentives for my decision making. So we have a growth plan which is going to bring £26 billion of growth to our region. It's identifying the problems in our region, and then with this growth plan having very clear directions of travel, expected outcomes of what we want to see in the changes. Now, when it comes to the climate emergency, we cannot afford not to do it, because it impacts on our region and on our economy, and actually it's also an opportunity for growth. So just think, for the next 10 years, we're going to have our young people having the opportunity to be skilled engineers on the tram. They're going to be building the tram. We're going to have opportunities for our young people to be involved in the tech of EV buses. we are really at the cusp of a really great opportunity by using our commitments to tackle the climate emergency in a plan for growth. Now, there are people around, there are people in our community who need support as well. So you mentioned the cost of living crisis. So we have the Mayor's Cost of Living Fund, £3 million that we have given out to local authorities to help the most vulnerable with heating, food and benefit advice. So there are other things that I can do, that I can make decisions on with my values as a Labour member of a Labour Mayor, being able to allocate funding to support people who need it. If I could just maybe add, a new responsibility is 37 million for work and health, to help our citizens who, too many people are unable to work, who want to, because they are not well. So we have money to work with the Integrated Care Board, the NHS, to help them in that space.
I suppose in these communities in particular, I've been here many times and covered flooding.
Yeah.
Flooding is not something in the future that might happen.
Exactly.
It's, you know, it's a very real threat, isn't it? And the concern might be that if we're all austerity and councils don't have enough money, the budgets don't go very far, are we still definitely on track to make sure flooding is not happening in these communities?
But we have seen, haven't we, our local authorities have been stripped bare of funding and barely managing to deliver adult social care and children's services, empty the bins and clear the snow and etc. Devolution has given us an incredible opportunity to do those huge infrastructure projects that are going to absolutely change the direction of travel for our region in a way that you wouldn't have if you didn't have a mayor and you didn't have devolution. And they're now, the whole of the north is now devolved. Not everybody's got a mayor, but everybody is now seeing, if you want money for your region, if you want those big projects, if you want to tackle the climate emergency, if you want to build hundreds of thousands of homes or affordable homes, social homes, you've got to buy into the devolution revolution. And I'm pleased that we have here in West Yorkshire brilliant partners, all in lockstep to deliver our West Yorkshire plan for 2040. And it's not the same everywhere, and actually that's our superpower, that we are great collaborators and cooperators. I think it helps we're from the same political party because we have the same values, and while we might have conversations behind closed doors, I think together we have a really strong cohesive argument for government.
Hopefully that has answered what Tracy does as the mayor, and also
happy to talk more about that because it's quite detailed. I really should do a day in the life of the mayor, because people are like, well, what do you do? And do you wear a chain? I'm like, I don't wear a chain. That's a ceremonial mayor.
But plenty on social media which will show you as well what the mayor does. You just preempted that slightly there, Mayor. This next question is someone who couldn't make it tonight, sadly. What concrete steps are you taking to increase the availability of truly affordable quality housing across all parts of Calderdale?
Well, thank you for that question, and I know that this is an issue for the people of Calderdale, as it is for many people across West Yorkshire, because Calderdale is beautiful, isn't it? And people want to live here, and sometimes that can send house prices far too high or rents too high, so that people who are born and raised here can't afford to live here. Now, I say it wherever I go because it really matters to me that I grew up in social housing in Batley, free school meals, we had our challenges, but that flat in Howden Clough was an absolute game changer for our family, because it gave us that security that we wouldn't get turfed out, the rent wouldn't go up and we couldn't pay it. And I know 100% I wouldn't be here today without that start in life. I want that for every young person in West Yorkshire and every family to have that opportunity. So we have set targets for affordable homes, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you that in the last 2 years we have built more affordable homes than at any time since the economic crash in '97. And I believe that is because we set really high stretch targets, because we knew that was so vital. Now, working with government, we've been set increasingly stretched targets, but I know we can build tens of thousands of homes for those thousands of people on our waiting list. But it isn't just about social homes, it's about affordable homes to buy, but also for those rents. And it's also for those landlords who are manipulating the system and overcharging for poor quality homes. We are working with the local authorities about how we develop a good landlord charter, how do we get the best people renting homes, putting their homes up for rental so that people can stay and settle and put down roots and not feel like they have to keep moving around. Because the biggest tragedy of all for our local authorities is the money, the millions they're paying on temporary accommodation for families living in bedsits, living in hotels, kids doing their homework on the toilet floor because there's no table, or buying food where you don't have to cook it because there's no cooking facilities, but it's costing the local authorities an arm and a leg. And I'm really pleased that in negotiations with government we are seeing really warm conversations coming back our way about government understanding this is an issue, that not only do we have to build the affordable homes that we are going to jump at, we also have to solve this problem of temporary accommodation.
And are you conscious in these decisions of where you're building so that these communities don't just become these sprawls, do they? The boundaries become very fluid, and so communities can almost be lost within all of that.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I think one of the things that Leeds in particular has been brilliant at is the densification of the city centre. And you will have seen that in Halifax town centre, that there's been homes built in the centre of town, so people can walk to work, they can walk to the Peace Hall, they can walk to the station. It is about building those communities and not necessarily out of town, big sprawling estates where there's no facilities. I know that in Mixenden, I had a really great visit up there I think it was last year, and being able to talk to residents about what they were wanting, and the fact that they didn't even have a good shop that sold fresh vegetables. And I was really pleased to get the update from Jane that now that shop is up and running, and people don't have to get a bus to come into Halifax to buy cheaper vegetables. They were not buying processed food because they couldn't afford the bus fare. So it's about building communities around these housing developments, as well as, of course, making sure that we move at speed, because we've got to get those spades in the ground on these houses, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mayor. Now let's move on to health, and I think we have got Trevor with us. Trevor.
Hello, Trevor.
Hi, Trevor. Please just wait for the microphone to get to you, please. And if you could stand up, then everyone can see you and hear you. Thank you.
Mental stigma and discrimination is increasing, with people such as Rishi Sunak and others saying mental health awareness has gone too far, which I think could lead to more potential suicides. How can this be countered?
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. I think it's something that is really alarming, that young people are increasingly not working because of rising anxiety, depression and stress. And also, we all know, don't we, that poverty can also impact on your mental health. And that's why it was really important for me, I mentioned the Mayor's Cost of Living Fund, to support people who are coming to get help because of stress about benefits and about pay, and about anxieties about housing and being vulnerable. I also know that the Integrated Care Board, the health system, really does understand what we have to do when it comes to health, and as I say, this funding to get people well and into work is going to be helpful. But I also know, coming from a creative background, that flow, or doing something that's so different to what you normally do, is also calming and quite helpful for mental health. And there's a woman that inspires me on a daily basis, Debs, and she had been in the mental health system most of her life. She had 2 girls who were her carers, and then she walked past a community centre, and outside was a board for creative minds, an organisation that uses art for mental health support. Fast forward, she's now an international artist and has paid for both of her kids to go to university because of that. And not everybody's Debs, of course not, but what an incredible journey. So that's why I've invested £500,000 in creative health, and we have in West Yorkshire become the country's first creative health system. And I think the way that government are looking at combined authorities, working more closely with health to get better outcomes, I think we will have an increasingly large role to play in that space. But I wonder, Fatima, if I could come to you as my inclusivity champion. Obviously, we need to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and sometimes when you are struggling with a mental health issue, you are the furthest away from help because you don't know where to go. And Fatima, as my inclusivity champion, is also part funded by the Integrated Care Board, so you do bridge health and my organisation. So I wonder if you could say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's really lovely to see you. Thank you for that question and for sharing your own lived experience. We do a lot of work with the mental health trusts to ensure that, one, we have the conversation about the stigma that is experienced by people that are living with challenging mental health situations, whether that's a diagnosed condition or not a diagnosed condition. A really practical example is something we're doing at the moment with our bus stations, about how we support staff within the bus stations who come into contact with somebody that's having an adverse mental health experience. And what we're doing is we're connecting in with individuals who are working in the mental health system with expertise and insight to support our staff. Another thing is the neurodiversity passport that we're working with to support the Mayor's Fair Work Charter, which is a really practical intervention about how to support people who are working or experiencing mental health conditions or mental health challenges to enable them to stay into work, but more importantly, to progress. But the final thing and the most important thing is that we need a societal conversation about the fact that people in a complicated 21st century life experience bad mental health, and that is okay. And that actually we need to create a society where we can facilitate dialogue and ensure that people get support however they need it. Some people want a creative health intervention, some people want counselling support which they can access via their GP, and we're working a lot with the mental health system to reduce those waiting times because we know that they're really challenging and quite long. But also more importantly, we're trying to cause some of the issues that result in people having adverse mental health and that inability to sleep at night, which is their economic circumstances, which is why the inclusive growth plan is so important, as well as creating jobs with better prospects for everybody in the region. But there's more we're doing specifically focused on those marginalised communities, looking through the protected characteristics. And one example of that is the way in which we assess decisions using something called the Equality Quality Impact Assessment. And one of that does consider routinely the implications for somebody in those circumstances, but we're also looking at socioeconomic deprivation in that context too. So lots going on, and we can maybe have a chat outside.
Thank you so much. And if I could just mention, if it's useful at all, that we have a scheme where you can use an orange wallet when you go on the bus and tap in. So it alerts, oh excellent, oh my God, you're champion. So that you can, it alerts the driver that you might need, you might have a hidden disability and you might need extra support. Thank you for being our advocate for that. And I hope if you know somebody that might value that, please do let them know that it's something that's available to everybody.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for bringing that important subject up. Now we're moving on to transport. Is Anne here with us? Anne, thank you. We'll just get the microphone to you before you start your question. Thanks so much.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor. Calderdale is quite rural compared to Bradford and Leeds areas. How can local Calderdale transport links be improved?
Thank you for that question, because I absolutely get it, and I absolutely feel your pain as well. So thank you very much. Now, we know that over the last decade or so, our bus companies have been reducing the service year on year because they've been cherry picking the services that are really lucrative for them and then cutting back on those socially necessary routes, because it's all about the bottom line. and profits for shareholders. That's why when I first became mayor, one of the first decisions I made was to start the process of bringing buses back into public control. Because once we have control of the network, then we can start to build out our network. Now we're going out to consultation on our local transport plan imminently, but I know that the offer for Calderdale is rubbish, and certainly in some of the rural communities. And we have taken representations from Jane and from councillors and from your members of parliament telling us, and from casework, where the buses have been reduced to such a point that they're meaningless or they've been stopped altogether. And we have been able to intervene, sometimes, not always. Now, if a bus company takes out a whole route, we can re-tender, we can go out again to the market and get another company to take that route. But it's irritating if they take a route that has like an every hour and then they turn it into every 2 hours, because then it's hard for us to get a company to then fill in those dots. But fundamentally, we are already paying for a substantial part of this service because we are paying to fill in the gaps where the companies have pulled out. Have you got a particular bus route? Because I have the bus guru here that I've invited along tonight because I know that buses are such an important thing for Calderdale. And if you've got specific bus routes, we can tell you what we're doing about that.
Now you have put me on the spot. Maybe a conversation later.
But if
591.
the which one?
591
Yeah,
and
definitely.
592 and 590, all
Todmorden, yeah.
to which hasn't been mentioned yet.
Yes.
No, it's coming up. It is coming up, yes.
So, Tim, do you want to speak to Todmorden for me? Tim?
Yeah, good evening, and no great surprise that buses have come up in this conversation because, you know, to Mayor's point, they just are not good enough at the moment, not just here in Calderdale but across the whole of West Yorkshire. And, you know, the Mayor took the decision just over a year ago, March last year I think it was, wasn't it, to bring the buses back under public control. That is a time-consuming process and we wish it would happen quicker. There's some legislation going through the Parliament at the moment actually which hopefully will make that process quicker and allow us to react in the future better. On the range of the 590 services, so the first bus services that you're talking about, they're all first services, the ones that you described. First came to us earlier this year and actually put on the table some fairly significant cuts to all of those services, which had we done nothing, because clearly we wouldn't let them do these things without our intervention, we would have seen no services on a Sunday whatsoever. There would have been no evening services after about 7 p.m.
Can't you sack them then?
Well, so this is the problem with the current system. The current system doesn't allow us to fire bus companies. We can't just, unfortunately, as much as I'm sure we would love to, unilaterally dismiss them from the network. This current system allows them to choose where to run routes, at times they want, at price they want to charge you, and at the timetable that they choose to run. And the bits that make money, well, guess what? They keep those, don't they? Because they're the ones that make the money. The bits of the network that don't make the money, they either cut completely and they remain cut, or we intervene and have to pay. So the changes that first just making the Calder value have cost us an extra £1 million a year that we've just put in place. Now that, in some respects, I know it still isn't good enough because it reduced the frequency to hourly from half hourly, and the frequency sometimes is insufficient. Add on top of that, poor punctuality. Add on top of that, things like buses breaking down. All of these things are exactly the reason why the Mayor's chosen to put in place the franchising arrangement, because that gives us total control. We pick the suppliers that we want to use, the operators that we choose to use, we specify the routes, the timetables, and we'll have a contract for everything, which we can then apply penalties on. And at the moment, we can't apply any of those penalties, so we will have a load of levers at our control in future, and we can specify the things we want to do. We're going to have to wait for patience because this isn't an overnight exercise, I'm afraid, but it is something that will change changed the way the buses operate in this region.
Thank you.
Can we just do this
one
second?
The First
We'll do this at
Bus
the
Act
end.
is a work of fiction.
Come and talk to me. Come and talk
We'll
to me
come
after
to
the
it,
event.
yeah, we will open it up, but just stay there because Nina, is Nina here? Nina, you were very much talking about this, weren't you, the franchising and improving, so it just fits in well whilst Tim is at the front here.
Yes, I'm from the Upper Calder Valley Sustainable Transport Group, and the question really is, it's sort of partially been answered, but I will read it out because it's about bus franchising, and it's about the appalling service quality on the Halifax-Todmorden corridor, but also, and I think this is important, where it goes over the border to Burnley and to Rochdale, and both of those sort of over the border bits from Todmorden start off in parts of Calderdale, i.e. Cornholme and Portsmouth and Walsden the other way. So my question is, are these routes going to be a top priority rather than Leeds being the top priority? So are they going to be the top priority for franchising and improving under the new regime?
Thank you, Tim. You want to talk about the
Yeah. So, look, we were going to take all services seriously. And, I'm not going to say that this service will take priority over every service in the region. But clearly, it's a really important connection. It makes cross-boundary journeys, as you say, for people for work, for access to healthcare, and all the important things that people know. The reasons why they catch the bus. People don't get on buses just because they fancy a day out. They're going to places, connecting themselves to opportunity or to healthcare, friends and family, and everything. So, for us to look at those parts of the network is going to be really important to us. We have the benefit of working with Greater Manchester because they've already done their franchising, and there will be a set of, I won't bore you with the details, but there's a set of arrangements in place that make sure we can negotiate systems of work across those borders. At the moment, we're still Behester First because they run that service over the border and can't be held to account in terms of the quality at the moment. So that new regime will give us all those controls, as I said. We'll have the contracts in place to make sure they do those things right. We'll make sure they have performance targets on things like punctuality. So punctuality in Calderdale at the moment is about 83%. Way too low, should be 95%, and that's where we're going to aim for. So we can hold those contractors, those suppliers to account. And it may not be First Bus in this region, I hasten to add. It could be a completely different operator that runs services in Calderdale in the future. That's the process that we're going through at the moment.
Thank you, Tim. And also, Nina, that's why it was really important for me. We were the first region to have the Mayor's Fair. So we brought in the £2 fare, and we've kept it lower than the government cap of £3 at £2.50. And we are the only ones with the day saver, so that's not included in the government scheme. So the £6, any bus, anywhere, any number of journeys, any operator, for £6. So I think that's, we're trying our best, building new bus stations. You'll know the Halifax bus station, isn't it lovely? Building high quality bus stations. And I love this story that what's his name? Andrew Gilligan.
Yeah.
The Boris Johnson's best right-hand person from Number 10 came to my office in Leeds for a conversation about investment and what government were going to give us. And he said, "We've looked at your plans for Halifax bus station. We don't think we don't think you should have the green roof, and we don't like the colour of the bins." I'm like, "Well, thank you for coming all the way from London to tell me that." And anyway, fast forward, we've got a green roof, haven't we? And we've got the bins that we want. So. And when we're doing our lotting, we're going to make sure that SMEs and smaller bus companies have an opportunity to bid in as well, because this isn't just about the big guys and gals who are coming in with big companies. It's also about local businesses and family businesses that should have an opportunity to bid.
We're going to do open questions in about 20 minutes. Thank you. We've just got Kirsty here. I think she'd rather I mentioned it. It ties in with what a few of you are saying. We want to encourage people, don't we, to live in this gorgeous part of the world, but you might want to work in Manchester or Rochdale or somewhere like that. But Kirsty here says she can't do it. It's been too unreliable. She had to give it up. She couldn't have these job opportunities that she wanted. So that's terrible, is it, that a young person can't realise her ambitions because the buses just weren't turning up and taking her to work?
Well, it's absolutely shocking. And it shames us, doesn't it, as a country? How have we got to this situation that in London and the South East, the young people, even in areas of deprivation, can at least access all the good stuff because the buses connect, the tram, you've always got choices. Our young people don't have that same opportunity, and I'm on a mission to change that. And let me tell you, when I lived in Slough, I was there for a few years on that Trans-Pennine Express. I was, for many days, absolutely incandescently furious. I missed a meeting. I couldn't get to something. I wanted to go to a gig in Manchester, and then I was worried I couldn't get home, so I didn't go. And then because I'm the mayor, everybody tells me, they see me and they tell me what's happening to them. People missing funerals, missing jobs, moving house out of the Calder Valley because the Colne Valley rather, because they just can't rely on the transport. This is not good enough. It's not good enough. We want that European style transport network where, and we deserve it, where everybody can move about. It's cost effective, it's affordable, and it's reliable, and more to the point, we have choice. Because if the Trans-Pennine breaks, you're stuck east to west. And certainly the same is true of buses. If your bus doesn't come, you might have to wait another 2 hours, and what's the point of going? So I absolutely see the problem, and it is my personal mission to get this transport network decent, up and running, and as good as other big European regions, because frankly, it's about blooming time.
And there are consequences then
Yeah,
for these bus companies if they
it
don't
affects our
provide.
economy, our opportunities, access to skills. Young people are choosing the university they can get to rather than the one they want to go to. It's just no good. It's
But
no
the
good.
buses, there's enough sort of punishment, if you like, for them if they don't deliver.
But this is why franchising will give us that. Because if you don't hit those targets of 95% reliability, you will pay the financial penalty. And I've been doing a fair bit of research with the team. We've been looking at other people's bus depots. We've been to Dublin to look at trams. We've been to Nottingham, Birmingham, Manchester, looking at how other people do it. And, you know, it is not beyond the wit of woman to get a system that works for us. And, you know, with those penalties that are really clear, so that when people bid for that franchise, they know what's expected of them.
Yeah, and people that live in these communities can still have those ambitions and be able to travel from A to B. We're staying with transport. Is Lorna with us? This is about cost. Lorna, thank you. We'll just get the microphone to you.
Hello, good evening. So bearing in mind what you're saying about a poor service from the buses, my question is, why has the cost of a weekly bus pass for young people aged 16 to 19 gone up from £10 a week to £13, a 30% increase overnight from the 1st of April? And the second part of that is, in Scotland, all young people get free bus pass. Could this be implemented in Yorkshire?
Thank you for that question. I always want young people to use public transport. They are the passengers of the future. When I first became mayor, we brought in a discounted fare for young people under 19. We've tried to keep it as low as possible. Inflation has meant that we've had to put it up a little. It is still not as expensive as it could be. And I'm thinking about your question about Scotland. I think it costs them like over 100 million to deliver that service. I know that in Greater Manchester, the mayor has brought in a mayoral precept to give free travel to, I think it's 16 to 18. But the public pay for that. So we have to find ways to ensure that our young people can travel. But I'm also mindful that there are young people in the care system, for example, that we really need to support to get to those jobs and opportunities. So we're part of Project Hope, where they travel for free. We also have a scheme for the first 3 months for apprentices who are on very low incomes to try and support them on public transport. But I absolutely agree with you. When we are franchising and we're looking at the full financial offer, it might be that we can find more money for the communities we want to support. I'm also being lobbied by people with a disability who want to travel before 9:30. That's a few £1 million extra. So we're having to team and ladle our monies at the moment. But as we develop our local transport plan, I want that tap in, tap out, capped fare. All of the bus, tram, train, where you know how much you're going to spend, so you can manage your budgets. But it's far too expensive, and I know in European cities, you know, free trains, there's other models and other financial models, but given the financial model we have now, we are looking, as we're franchising, to see what more can we do and what more innovations we can identify.
I think particularly for young people,
I agree.
Before, haven't we, that young people had a very tough time in the pandemic. Cost of living, they can barely afford to get in the housing market. So just to go out and mix with people and enjoy the things you do when you're young, it's very difficult when the bus fare goes up so much, isn't it?
No doubt about it. Of course, it impacts on people's weekly budgets, and that's why the £2 fare meant so much to me. You know, bringing that in was a game changer, because it was, remember, it was before government did it. Government were ringing us saying, how are you doing this? And then they brought it in and it became a national programme. It was always, I like it when it's made in West Yorkshire and delivered to the rest of the country. But I think affordability is really important. But alongside that, I think people will pay a little bit more if it's reliable. Because if you're paying, it doesn't matter if the bus is free, if it doesn't come, or it comes 2 hours late. So what's really important is that balance between cost and also reliability.
Yeah, thank you, Lorna. We're staying with transport, but a little bit different. Heather gave us this one. I think this has been an issue for quite a while in this area, and that's the issues of roadworks. I know. In the Calder Valley, it really has been a problem for a long, long time. So what are you doing about it?
So, roadworks, hello Jane. So roadworks are not my responsibility, but I absolutely want to applaud the way that the leadership here in Calderdale have been so robust in trying to ensure that you get a better road network, that will take segregated buses so you can rely on the bus, it's not stuck in traffic, so you can actually have an electric bike, because you wouldn't cycle without it, although there might be cyclists who do the hills of Calderdale, but so you can have a bike and know that you're protected from the traffic. This has got to be the future, that we can have segregation so that buses can run on time. So I don't know, Jane, if you want to speak to that.
I'll stand up. The Mayor is fantastically optimistic and I admire her optimism tremendously. You'll know that the roads we've got are meant for pack horses, many of them, and actually not for modern traffic and motor vehicles. And you will also know, if you've ever gone past our many, many roadworks, that when you have an opening in any of our Calderdale roads, what's underneath is the cable people. You know, the BT, the sewers, the fresh water, the electricity and the gas pipes. It's a nightmare under those. And all of those utilities, every time we have something, it seems really simple. You have a hole in the road, you fix the pothole or whatever it is, and we know that underneath. There's even, when we did the flooding works here, Mytholmroyd medieval culverts really under the roads. It is an absolute bleeding nightmare. We absolutely get that. One of the things that we're going to do, it was in our budget this year, and we're currently working through the legislative process, is we're going to bring in something called lane rental. I'm not entirely on top of all of the practical detail, but basically we are going to make sure that, shall we say, the utility companies have positive encouragement and indeed disincentives to stretch out work and to do it badly. And I think the figure at the moment is about the fine of about 2,500 a day in relation to actually not getting on and fixing those things. But let's not pretend that there's an easy fix in terms of our roads and our communities, our 6 towns in Calderdale. And I think we've got a particular nightmare on the A646 in terms of the sheer number of openings and the lack of alternatives. Poor people in Midgley, Sorby Village, Hubberton and so on, all really struggling because, of course, anybody who's local nips up on the tops on either side when the A646 is blocked. It's a nightmare. It's not an easy fix, really, and I suffer the pain as much as anybody else. In fact, just this last week, we're trying very much to make sure that the utilities operators who've contracted with the traffic management and the contractors who are mending the holes, making the holes and mending the holes, trying to get them there with the traffic management, keeping somebody there, your guy in the van, to try and keep traffic moving. We try and make sure that they know what the flow of traffic is along the A646. You know, for goodness sake, people are going towards Halifax in the morning and coming back in the afternoon, and we have to keep working at that, actually. But really, I absolutely applaud the Mayor's commitment to active travel, segregated cycleways. Sometimes I feel the only answer is the canal. Actually, it'd be quicker sometimes than the A646.
You've talked about segregated bus lanes and cycle lanes, which, considering we live in a 2-lane narrow valley, we can't all get on our bikes, and
why not?
oh, come on.
I'm 82 and I do.
Yeah, but not everybody is on their bikes. So, and this area is quite a wonderful tourist area. You've been to the Picture House for our festival there. We have lots of children's events which bring in families from far and wide. They're not just all local people. And because of that, and our quirky shops, it helps boost our tourist economy. However, in recent months, many visitors to Hebden have either stopped coming or have shortened their stays in Hebden because they drive. And they drive because, as I said, they come far and wide. But the parking charges have gone up so much compared to even Halifax, which is actually dirt cheap. In Hebden, it's gone up from, in some places, from 80p an hour to £2 an hour. So with many UK towns are now reducing or removing parking charges to help their local businesses and boost their local economy. And with many of the Hebden Bridge businesses now struggling, and if you go around Hebden, you'll see a lot of shutting.
Mel, if you just ask your question, sorry, we're just running out of time.
I'm about to.
Thank you.
I'm asking the Mayor specifically, rather than our Calderdale councillors, what ideas does the Mayor have for supporting local businesses and keeping them and the town's quirkiness going while supporting the tourist industry?
Thank you, Mel, for that question. So we are developing our local visitor economy plan, and we're working with other mayors across Yorkshire to have a Yorkshire offer. We know that Hebden is one of the shining stars of Calderdale, and I know that people come from far and wide to visit it. I've done many on many occasions, and the shops are fabulous. My gentle pushback to you is there are times I've had to come in a car, and actually it's been an utter nightmare because there are so many cars, you can't find anywhere to park, and you spend all your time driving around, clogging up the streets, trying to find somewhere to park. I would say parking is not my responsibility, but supporting businesses is, and also for tourism. I'm really pleased that there's a number of communities where you've got transport hubs, and I think you're developing one, is my understanding, in Todmorden, is it? Or Hebden? Hebden, where you've got the opportunity to have an offer, whether that's electric cargo bikes or whether that's other opportunities to get out and about. But I do think there is something that we have to address, that Hebden is so fabulous, particularly the city centre, where the musicians are, and one of the reasons why it's so lovely is because there's no cars, and it's all pedestrianised, and it's a really super environment for musicians, and sunny days, seeing families just go to listen to the music. So I think parking charges is something that local authorities across not just the whole of West Yorkshire, but the whole of the country have had to look at in order to try and reduce congestion in town and city centres, and also to, quite frankly, have an income stream when funds are so tight. But I would say that businesses have struggled, particularly during the energy crisis, and we've been working, we have a scheme to support businesses to see how they can reduce their energy bills, and how we can help them, whether that's lighting, a new boiler, and also whether they have a product that they could export, how can they work with other businesses. I have the Mayor's Business Board, chaired by Mandy Ridyard, who runs Produmax in Bradford, and we hear from retail, we get submissions from retail about what more we can do. But I know it's come on the back of national insurance rises, and there's a lot of pressure on small businesses currently. But the majority of our businesses in West Yorkshire are small.
The country can either reduce it significantly or not, removing it. And we're talking about towns the same size as Hebden, but not so as touristy. Why is it the fact that, and their businesses are being supported by local councils, why isn't it something like this that you as a mayor said, actually yes, we need to, you just said Hebden is a shining light.
It is.
So it needs to be supported more to keep it as a shining light.
And it's green and incredible, and there's definitely no room for cars, and it was incredible to see families picnicking in public spaces with their kids playing in the water fountain. It is, the public realm is actually as attractive as well for tourists and for residents. But Jane, I don't know if you'd like to just maybe share your thinking about parking. It's not my remit, I'm afraid.
This isn't the Mayor's remit, but quickly, Jane.
But Mel, I'm sure Jane would speak to you afterwards as well, if necessary.
Yes, certainly. And it's an ongoing issue, and I know it's an ongoing issue in places like Hebden, places like Brighouse, indeed places like Halifax. And it's a real balancing act. And it's really difficult at the moment because the Mayor is talking about franchising and having control of the buses and solving some of the problems. And at the moment, the bus service is terrible, and getting people to make a switch onto the bus when they can't rely on it is really hard. So people buy a cheap car and run it, young people buy a cheap car and run it, and we have actually now, and during COVID, people bought cars rather than going in public transport. So in terms of people having choice, there's less choice than there should be, really. And it's also a problem in terms of the cost of living, because people who work in shops very often don't earn very much. They've got a cheap car, they don't want to pay for the parking as well, but they want to park near their work, etc. So in terms of the trains, in terms of the buses, people have got fewer choices. I just wanted to say one thing about parking. Parking fees for councils can only be spent on highways and highways repairs. So, you know, and we need to think, I know about the problems in Hebden and elsewhere. We need to think about how we manage actual car parks and on-street parking and make that dynamic so that people, instead of driving around making the air pollution worse, can actually park. And particularly people with disabilities or mobility difficulties can do that.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Now that brings to a close our pre-selected questions. So if you do now want to ask a question, I know many have been very patient tonight, just let one of our colleagues know. Hands are going up already, just let us know. Please try and keep your questions as brief as you can, because we want to get through as many as we can.
And I'm getting constant complaints about the buses, especially going, like the gentleman said, across the borders. But that's not my specific question. I'd like to make a comment and a question. I'll be very quick. Why don't we sort the buses out before we start implementing car park charges? It would just be common sense to sort public transport out before then trying to restrict usage of car cars.
Absolutely.
But my concern that I put a question in about today, it never got picked, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak in this open questioning, is safeguarding for females and young children in Tottenham. And I've got 4 ladies at the moment, maybe 5, who have been totally failed by safeguarding, to the extent that a couple of weeks ago, through that failure, one lady who's a private house owner with a mortgage had a fire attack against her. It burned both cars on the drive. There were 2 children in the house, 3 adults. They climbed out of the back window, climbed onto the shed because it was an enclosed backyard, and stood on a wall until the police officers had to come and break the fence to get them out. Now, this lady had been complaining on several occasions. It was to do with drugs, it was to do with what I would consider organised crime, and to no avail. The police didn't seem bothered, and when they went through the preliminary administration of receiving the complaint, there was no service there. And then this lady now has had to move out of Todmorden. The insurance company are paying for her temporary accommodation, and she's absolutely in fear. And we can do better, and I know as a councillor I can do better, but I seem to be hitting brick walls. And when there has been meetings, it's been it should all be all female meeting, there shouldn't be a male there, so I've not been invited, and I'm the person who's been liaising closely with these ladies. So I'd just like to bring it aware to you, and if I could directly correspond with you about this issue, Tracy, then I would really appreciate it.
Of course, and that sounds absolutely horrendous. And of course, I don't know the circumstances, but if you share it with us, I don't know, Alison, do you want to talk about the work maybe you're doing in Calderdale on the safety of women and girls? Just for context, you know that safety of women and girls has been my biggest priority, and the public's priority in antisocial behaviour and serious and organised crime. So this is very alarming if you feel you didn't get a service. Our job is to hold the police to account, and Alison, as my Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, is very much at the front line of meeting the community safety officers and partners and so on. But Alison, I wonder if you could just say a few words to that.
Yeah. So clearly I'm very happy for you to share the details of the cases that you've mentioned with me directly, and I will raise them with the Chief Constable in person. You do need permission from the complainants. I just need to say that, because obviously we can't discuss anything with you directly.
So it has to be written.
So an email, I'll give you my email address at the end of this meeting. I won't talk about everything we're doing with violence to eliminate violence against women and girls, but West Yorkshire Police are 100% behind us in that regard. So I'm surprised that the women have not had a satisfactory service. When we look at the satisfaction from members of the public who have been subject to crime, actually the violence against women and girls, crimes, rape, domestic abuse, they're the highest rating of all the satisfaction that West Yorkshire Police receives. So they're doing something right, but when they're doing something wrong, we need to know what that is and act. Just generally, serious organised criminality, we've got this thing called Clear Hold Build, that is a national initiative that was piloted here in West Yorkshire, where the police work with local partners, local authorities, to clear serious organised crime from an area. They then build up that area with the local partners to make sure that crime doesn't return. So they clear it, they hold it, then they build it. And since February, West Yorkshire Police have been working alongside partners, and they've taken £1.1 million worth of drugs off the streets. They've taken 248 vehicles off the streets. They've done lots of work in and around Calderdale with some particular issues of serious organised criminality that's been committed there. So there's lots of work. I've got a load of details here which I won't bore you with because we're getting to the end of the meeting, but I'm really happy to talk to you or any councillor. I come to council meetings, I have surgeries, I am very accessible to the public, so if anyone wants to talk to me about criminal matters, obviously I'm not the Chief Constable and only he can deploy resources, but we can hold him to account for what he is or he is not doing. And we've got a casework team, Tracy's got a casework team that can deal with particular complaints about policing. So please do be assured that we've got that mechanism in place to support you.
Yeah, thank you. Such an important subject.
And if I could just jump in and say, as a councillor, for others in the room, we do have the Mayor's Community Safety Fund. I think it's been about 4 million proceeds of crime money that goes back into the community. So if you've got a community group, a charity that will help us make your community safer, you can apply for that funding. And it's if you're working in partnership, it's up to £20,000, so it's not insubstantial. So do check that out if it's something that's of interest.
Okay, we haven't that much time. Let's move on.
Neurodiversity is something that we're really looking at also in our organisation. As an organisation, how do we embrace all of our colleagues, and we have a group in our organisation where people have come together, they've motivated themselves and they've come together and they're asking good questions of us. What's really important to me is devolution gives us the opportunity to decide who we help and how we help. So certainly when it comes to our skills programmes, we know that often neurodivergent youngsters are overlooked or they slip through the net. We are working with providers, Calderdale College is one example, to ensure that young people get that support going through the system. But you're absolutely right that I think there's greater awareness now. One of my daughters is dyslexic, the other is dyspraxic. Luckily, they're both in the creative industry, so it's all welcome there. But working in an office or in other more, I suppose, rigid jobs where it's 9 to 5 and you have to do particular tasks, that there has to be more understanding and open-mindedness. But I know that Fatima is really leading on this about inclusion of who gets the opportunities, and we're working really hard to make sure everybody has access.
Thank you. Next, bearded man at the back. You were first.
I thought you might say bearded lady then.
So Wolverhampton Bridge has plans to build 41 wind turbines on some very protected peat. It's been called in as a nationally significant project. I wondered what your stance on this project was at the moment, Tracy, and where you think that might go in the next year or so.
Thank you for that. I was aware of it. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's not my decision to make. But you know, as I've explained in the early part of this meeting, I believe we have to be sustainable in our energy offer. And you will see onshore, offshore wind being increasingly part of a government strategy to unlock the grip of countries halfway around the world. And you know what's happening in Iran at the minute, and people being very anxious about the price of oil and the access to energy and so on. So it's not my decision. Like you say, it's a significant project that others will be deciding on. But I am pro alternative ways of gathering energy, whether that's solar panels, which we've done on bus stations and police stations, public buildings. We're supporting individuals through a loan scheme, our one-stop shop for retrofitting your home, whether that's windows, whether that's a ground source heat pump or solar panels, supporting families to have cheaper bills. And also onshore wind is part of that story. So not my responsibility, but I do believe we need it across the country, not just here.
And Mayor, very briefly on that, is there also we've got to have the empathy as well for where these things are put, haven't we?
I think the conversations has to be absolutely inclusive with communities, and communities need to be listened to, no doubt about it. And we co-create these things, don't we? And like we always say, we're building things for the future, for our kids and grandkids. And we have to make decisions that aren't just about us in this moment, but about the future, but also bearing in mind, and you were saying you live on the flight path to Leeds Bradford, we have to also work with people and, communities who are impacted by it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to go to the 82-year-old cyclist.
Right. What I would like to ask the Mayor is how much clout she carries with the police. In other words, what do you think about the epidemic of pavement parking in Yorkshire. Because when I'm out on my bike, if I see anybody pull onto a footpath and they're in the car, I stop and ask them why they've pulled onto the footpath. And they don't know, because it's become the normal. Now we're on about Calderdale being short of brass. They should take a leaf out of the city of Exeter. They introduced no pavement parking after the government in 2011 passed the rules with regards to parking to the local authorities. So if you go to Exeter, it might be the only place in the country apart from London where there's a £70 fine for parking on a footpath.
Also wheelchairs and
if Jane just walked on Queen's Road today, 59 cars on the footpath. Now you might say, well, they're keeping out of the way. A footpath is not constructed to the same specification as a road. So therefore, all it does is damage the footpath.
Right, let's get the answer then.
Just a minute, let me finish. The footpath on the avenue where I live, across from where I live, is now level with the road. It's like a drop pavement, just simply for vehicles parking on it. There can be nothing on the avenue at all, nothing parked at all.
We've only got 6
The delivery
minutes.
van will come along.
Let's see what people have heard. Thank you.
What are your thoughts? When are you going to do something about it?
Right,
Thank you so much. It's not my priority currently about parking on pavements. However, I am very aware that this is an issue for people with a disability, a wheelchair, a buggy, a cyclist. You're absolutely right. For the narrow roads of West Yorkshire, this is a perennial problem. But if I may, sir, it is a local authority issue. But Jane has heard your thoughts. Thank you.
If you're in
There's just at the back there. We'll just discuss it afterwards if that's all right. So at the back there, you've been waiting very patiently.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will discuss it later.
Shall we hear all of the questions and I can answer all of them?
Yes, we have. Pick about 3 more, is that alright? So, number 1, number 2, number 3. Right, let's go. Thank you.
Hi.
You've spoken about the urgency of the climate emergency. I'm just wondering why then you supported the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport. We can't be expanding airports in a climate emergency. It's absolute madness.
Thank you.
Next one.
You've asked 7 men to speak before you got to me.
There was no women.
I had my hand up. I'm a woman. Yeah.
You've got to shout at them.
I know. Yeah, I'm used to it. But one of the things I wanted to ask is, I think I misunderstood the concept of taking the buses into public control. I thought they were going to be owned by the public, by, West Yorkshire, and it seems not. It's going out to franchise. But I heard today from someone that Calderdale isn't included in the franchise. It stops before it gets to Calderdale.
No,
is that true?
No. Calderdale is part of West Yorkshire.
Yes, I know.
We are all in this together. There's phasing, there's lots of particular routes, but we will not own it because we're not running it. But we will franchise it like they do in London. So you bring
Manchester, do they own?
They're the same. No, they're the same. They franchise.
So they franchise.
It's the same model. Yeah.
Right.
But there are people who would like us to own and run the buses. But we believe that the bus companies are very good at running bus services. No, when they do it right. Yeah. And if we have the expectations from them, they can run it well. I'll come to you, sir, about the buses, and Tim, can you answer that one, and then I'll come to the friend at the back about the airport.
I won't profess to be an expert on the services, so if we have a chat afterwards, let me get the detail. I've just looked at the timetables myself. As you say, quarter to 8 p.m. One every 2 hours doesn't seem like it's good enough, so let's have a chat and see what.
Thank you so much, Tim. Brilliant.
Thank you.
And finally on the airport. Now I know I am not the most popular person in this room when it comes to the airport, because as the mayor, I also am aware that to have an airport is an incredibly powerful tool to bring international trade and investment, to help people, our diaspora, where we speak 170 different languages, enabling people to keep those connections, enabling working class families to have a holiday. And we know that people who don't want an airport here in Leeds Bradford, they go to Manchester to go on holiday. So we know that what we have to do is we have to work with the airport to hold the airport to incredible high standards, which is why I am pleased to see the 200 million investment actually, because the terminal is now zero carbon, and it is not a rackety old drafty terminal with leaky heating. It's actually a higher quality terminal. Now we are also expecting the sector to have sustainable aviation fuel. You'll have seen the government has invested billions in SAF, and the expected outcomes for SAF are looking really positive. I do believe that we would, in the way that you've seen the Mayor of South Yorkshire fight tooth and nail to get Doncaster Airport open. Now there is a reason for that, because if you can work with your businesses and your communities, you can make sure that that growth is as sustainable as possible. And I know it's not popular, and I know there are people here who may, when they were young, travelled abroad and travelled all over the world, and now have a different view that people shouldn't fly. And I try and use the train whenever I can. I cycle, I do my bit. I expect the airport to do its bit. I expect the airlines to do their bit. With innovation, we have lighter planes. We have planes that are flying on different fuels. But it is a challenge for us in a global world that we don't want to be isolated to those opportunities.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, Mayor, on that point. Thank you so
Pleasure,
much,
as
everyone.
always.
Thank you to the Mayor, thank you to the special guests. Thank you.